Hey, Brian, welcome back. How you doing today?
Hello, David. I'm doing fantastic.
Today's topic is a big one, so this one may run a little bit long, but we want to talk about landing patterns.
Landing pattern. Well, of course, that's more than one thing, isn't it? Right? Some people are flying a simple approach, and some people are flying much more complicated approaches where they're doing hook turns and whatnot. So let's keep it simple. Let's focus on the standard pattern. Now, typically, we're talking about 3 altitude location checkpoints that you're trying to get people to follow, right? So we have pattern entry point somewhere around 1,000 feet or a little bit below. And we've got another one at the turn from downwind to base leg, which is somewhere around 600 feet. And then you get another one turning to final, hopefully into the wind, but not always, right? Sometimes it's actually safer to land crosswind for various reasons, somewhere around 300 feet or so. Now, if everybody, in theory, flies this same pattern, regardless of what's going on or how many canopies are there, we can make room. I mean, you look at big ways, you used to go to Hercules Boogie and things like that, where the sky is filled with nylon and everybody's just flowing through this pattern, and it looks beautiful, and it's very organized. When people come from smaller drop zones into boogies and things like that, you realize, wow, their definition of a pattern is not the same as mine. They just simply aren't capable of hitting those. It's basically just 2 turns to final and land. That's the goal of the pattern. Predictable, right? So you can look around and see another canopy and you know what their next move is going to be. But if your next move is a series of S turns to prevent you from overshooting because you didn't fly those pattern points correctly, either the altitude was wrong or the location was wrong, you can find yourself wrapped up with somebody else. So I think that we need to not only identify with the pattern points on the ground, these altitude location checkpoints, but as you fly a good program, so in other words, you work with a real experienced jumper and they say, okay, today, given this wind, given this canopy that you're flying, these are the spots that I want you to be, 900, 600, 300, turn to final. And they show you an aerial map. So you do your best to fly this actual traffic circuit, and as you do, you look at the target most of the time, and you observe the angle of the target with respect to you, just like we would when we're flying an aircraft. So as you're flying downwind and you're abreast, you're across from the target, the actual landing point, what's the angle? Down and to your left, if it's a left-hand pattern. Is it a 45, or is it steeper? As you get to the turn to base leg, what does the target look like as you turn to final approach when you're at that final turn at 300 feet, what I call the A point? What does the target look like? Well, at that point, of course, it should be the angle of the glide of the canopy today, right? So on a no-wind day, the canopy might glide 2 to 1, it might glide 3 to 1, somewhere in there, depending on the wing loading and the design of the parachute. So I like to build the pattern from the ground up, having some anticipation of what the relative glide is today, right? So true glide doesn't vary unless you change what the parachute's doing, like adding brakes, rear risers, front risers, and even body position affects the true glide. But when you face into a headwind, of course, the glide ratio diminishes, right? So you're flying to a steeper angle. So you have to anticipate that. And then you build the pattern from the ground up. So if we kind of think in terms of these altitude location checkpoints only, we have a limitation, which is when the wind shifts, those points don't matter anymore. Right? We have distances from the target, but we don't. You're not over the barn at 900 feet. You're not over, right? You're not over the otter at 600. So we need to have something much better than that. That's where these angles come in, where you're observing on a no-wind day and then on a medium wind day, then a high wind day, what does the target look like, and trying to memorize that sight picture so that when you do land off or when you do go to another drop zone, you're not worried about points. You're just thinking, what does the target look like in relationship to me? So you get this gut feeling, hey, I'm too steep, I'm too shallow, I need to deal with this. I need to make a pattern adaptation early on, right? Because, of course, it's not about a robotic procedure where I make 90-degree turns and automatically I'll be on final. Every pattern is a series of adaptations. Success is a series of corrected mistakes. So we turn a little bit to the right if we're a little bit on the high side, right? So if you're flying a left-hand traffic circuit, turning right on the downwind leg will create more space, create a longer base leg. If I'm a little bit low, I turn a little bit left and I cut off some corners. So that is part of it. And so as a student, very often people feel like, oh man, I didn't have my pattern points and I suck at this. And you got to realize that we, even as experienced skydivers, are kind of making it up as we go, but it's very much based on this sight picture, based on a gut level. What does it look like? What's the angle? If it feels wrong, I change my heading so that I can fix it prior to the A. If you're at 100 feet off the ground and you're making big moves to try to hit the target, well, you've already screwed yourself. It's already too late to be making big changes.
Make smaller changes earlier.
Exactly. Smaller changes earlier allows you not only to not do that low turn that hurts you, because we've all read the back of Parachutist magazine. Low turns executed in the wrong manner are what leads to a lot of injuries. So if you do it earlier, I find also you can be in a sort of consistent flight mode for a longer period of time leading up to your flare so that you can relax, breathe, and look around for traffic. Have a bigger sight picture so that you're not task loaded steering your canopy leading up to the flare. So I think it's really important for everyone to be able to fly a beautiful pattern. And of course, we have a little bit more complexity when we're dealing with hook turn stuff, but it is just a pattern.
So you mentioned, I think one of the most important things is the pattern provides predictability, right?
Not only for you, but for everyone else.
And so we want to, when possible, enter on a downwind. That's ideal, correct?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you define it. I mean, typically, right, in aviation, we think of it downwind-based final. However, I'm finding tremendous benefit from adding another pattern point, what I call a D point, right? So instead of this just a 900-foot point being where I'm entering the pattern, I actually cut across. I have people have a point that is on the wind line directly upwind of the target as my D point. And in this model, I would say 1,200 feet.
So it's like a crosswind.
It's like a pre-base leg, right, exactly. And what that does is if I fly for 300 feet perpendicular to the wind line for 300 feet of descent, and then I turn left to my downwind, I've created my offset. I know how far
back to final.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
So the question I want to ask, though, is these entries always work good as long as you are upwind of the landing area when you get open.
Yep.
Sometimes on low wind days in a turbine drop zone, the spot starts well downwind of the landing area. So occasionally I found myself in a situation where I've been first out and I get open and now I'm basically on final, but I'm really high. So would you have a technique to deal with that if you're downwind of the landing area at opening altitude? Because now if I try to fly over the landing area and enter from the other side, now I'm flying right into the other traffic that's coming back the other direction.
Right, yeah. So I think if you think about where that flow of traffic is coming from and you sort of respect that, if you are coming sort of upstream against the flow, be where people aren't going to be. So if it's a left-hand traffic circuit, as you're coming back up towards the target, if you're on the other side of the target as you're coming back up in, and then you can end up, provided that you have the altitude, entering that full box pattern where you've got a D point, C point, B, and A. So that can work.
And if the altitude isn't at that point, I know oftentimes what I do, and I really don't know if this is correct or not, but I'll maybe kind of favor out to the base leg side, and then, like, let's say it's left traffic, I'll end up making a right turn onto a left base. Does that make sense?
Right. When you're low, that's all you can do. Right?
Or straight into final. I mean, those are your only choices.
Yeah, who hasn't been there where, the spot was long enough that all you can do is just hold a heading and get back as far as you can get. But when you've got that kind of thing going on, the main thing is look around. Be respectful of the fact that you're the anomalous data point, right? I'm doing something different from everybody else. Head on a swivel, and if you're going to make a turn, look before you go, and of course, don't look just straight to the side. You look down into the side because that's where your parachute's going to go when it turns.
And maybe if you or somebody that's in the proper pattern is going to be the one ending up getting cut off and not landing in the ideal place, maybe that should be you.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, the rude one should have to walk.
Perfect. Brian, as always, great conversation. We really appreciate it. And we're going to learn more about everything you're up to at transcendingfear.com.
That's me.
All right. Thanks, Brian. We'll talk to you in the next episode.
All right. Ciao.